Thank you so much for being here. Janey Lee Grace, welcome to the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast. Thank you so much for taking part in this interview today. I'm so happy to have you here because last week I was Googling natural anti-aging influencers and you were the first name that appeared.
Really? Oh,
I
good.
find that you do so many topics, you cover so many topics that I'm interested in. And today we're going to talk about sex and sobriety and self-care. And today is a great day to be sober after we're recording this the morning after the Euro Cup final.
Well, yeah, it's been called Hangover Monday, isn't it? All the talk about alcohol, man, it's been bonkers.
So how is the atmosphere? Lots of hangovers?
Yeah, well, certainly from what I've seen in the media, but thankfully not around my house.
Oh, that's
I'm very grateful for that.
Fantastic. Well, I wasn't watching the match. I was reading your book, Happy, Healthy, Sober, last night. And as a sober person myself, there's lots of things I can relate to. For example, there's one part you mentioned celebratory drinks after an interview when you worked on the radio. And I used to work on the radio here in Spain, and I used to be really nervous on air and full of adrenaline. My heart was going crazy. It was a nighttime show. And I always felt that I needed a drink after just to kind of feel grounded so I could sleep. And I was wondering, we often consider that alcohol is a reward. I was wondering, what do you think now? What would you recommend now instead of alcohol?
Yeah, well, I mean, just to sort of preempt that, I think you're right. It's really interesting that we give alcohol so much credit for everything, and it's the social glue that sticks everything together, so celebrations, commiserations, but also it's the thing that we think will give us confidence when we want to feel sassy and sexy and confident, but we also believe that it makes us chilled and helps us rest. I mean, when you actually look back, it's ridiculous that we attribute all those clever benefits to what is essentially liquid, and if you want to really tell it like it is, poison. But we all did it. We did it for years, and I certainly did. And I think what happens is when you finally recognize that actually there is no need for alcohol. There is not one single benefit from alcohol. It has zero benefits. When you finally grasp that, you can start to ask yourself, okay, what is it that I'm really wanting? What's the feeling I'm really wanting to achieve here? Because, we know it's this kind of think, feel, act cycle, isn't it? We have a thought, how we want to feel. And then we look to our unconscious mind and we ask ourselves, oh, how do I get that feeling? And what would have happened for you and for me in many occasions is, that the thought is, oh, I've done a really good show and I want to feel rewarded and I want to feel good. And I also want to wind down now, So what's the feeling you're trying to create? Well, I'm trying to create a feeling of feeling okay and happy and being able to relax. And then you have to ask yourself, well, how can I actually achieve that? And it certainly isn't by something in a glass. So we become much better as time goes on at focusing on what the real resources are that can do that for us. So what's a healthy way of relaxing? And of course, it's different for everyone. But, in the book, I suggest masses and masses of sort of possibilities, self-care tips and tools, And so it might be that you actually just need to take a bath with essential oils or listen to a podcast or go for a walk in nature or whatever it might be. Or maybe it is that you want to consume something, in which case I'm sure we'll get to it, but my kind of mantra is keep the ritual, change the ingredients. So if you genuinely do feel, I really do want a celebratory drink of something, nothing wrong with that, but why should it have to be alcohol? Why should the word celebration equal alcohol? Have a lovely glass of something alcohol-free that you really enjoy, and the choices are endless now. But as I say, it may be that you don't need to consume anything at all, but it all comes down to putting the pause in. So you have that thought, oh, I really want to feel, grown up, happy, relaxed, chilled, whatever it is. How can I create that feeling? In the past, I always created it, or I thought I did, with alcohol. But now I'm going to put the pause in and ask myself, how can I actually really properly create that in a healthy way?
Excellent. Another part I could actually really relate to is that you stopped drinking during dry January, and you had the intention of it being just for January. And for me too, actually, I stopped drinking in 2016, I think, or actually 2015. That's even better. So I was actually doing this front cover magazine shoot here in Spain, and this cover just kept getting delayed. I was just wanting to just, give up alcohol and chocolate and pizza just to kind of lose a few pounds. And then over time, this cover shoot got delayed more and more. And I just actually got used to sobriety, and I really liked it. My eczema went, I lost weight without really doing that much. And
That's great.
And my skin got better, and it's just fantastic. So what stopped you from drinking again in February?
Well, for me, I went through many rounds of this sort of ditching the booze for a while and then going back to it. And I think many people do. And what's really interesting is I think lots of people stop drinking, exactly as you say, because they want to lose weight, or they want, they want to do a detox, a mini detox. And then what happens in many cases, and I'm thrilled for you that it didn't, it's brilliant. But what happens in so many cases, certainly for me, lots of times, was that you ditch the booze, you do manage to lose a few pounds eventually, and you start to feel a little bit better. And then you find yourself at a party or an event, and then the wine witch comes calling and says, well, there's nothing else to drink really here, and everyone's having a great time. And you know what? You don't have a problem. You've got this because you've just done however long without booze. So it's really not a problem for you. You can easily be a moderate drinker. So just have one, yeah? And then for me, that happened so many times. And then I was back on that slippery slope. But this last time in 2017, when I stopped, it was a very different kind of experience. It was that I'd been feeling really not that great for months. I was so conscious of my own sort of, I felt so vulnerable. I looked in the mirror and I hated everything I saw, and I was so scared of getting older, and everything just felt so negative. And I was definitely bloated and really not feeling authentic, not surprisingly, on account of I've been, I'm kind of queen of natural health. And there I was drinking every night, waking up at 3 a.m. every day. So I knew something had to change. I just didn't know how. I just didn't know how to do it. And then I was given a book to read, which completely kind of, it's like a switch flicked, really, because I read this book. It was the Sober Diaries by Claire Pooley, and she was just like me. She was, someone who wasn't at rock bottom, didn't need rehab, but definitely something had to change. And so she had gone through the same experiences, and she made it work. And it just so happened that it was Christmas. It just so happened that I was given a couple of weeks to read the book before we were going to be interviewing Claire on the radio. And that I was going to be meeting her in the January. So for me, it wasn't a choice of, okay, I need to lose some weight, I need to detox, January's coming up, I'll do dry January. It was more a case of something has to change. I've got to give this a go. I just absolutely have to give this a go. And it just so happened to be January. So I figured, okay, I can do this for January, but I couldn't at that time see beyond it. I couldn't see what was going to happen, because I felt so nervous about the whole thing, because it's who I am, and has been for so many years, or so I thought.
I think it's more daunting to give up forever, isn't it?
Absolutely. Exactly. The kind of I'm giving up forever felt too much, but I definitely headed into it with a different kind of approach. So when I was even just a couple of weeks in, although, I think what's quite interesting is sometimes when you do recognize that something has to change. So when you're doing this from, it sounds a bit sort of melodramatic, but I really knew at a soul level that something massive had to change. It wasn't just a little kind of health trend. It wasn't just, I'm going to do some juicing for a month, or I'm going to have more raw food, or I knew it was so much more than that. It was so much more than that. So I knew within 2 or 3 weeks that although it was quite tough at the beginning, I knew that this had to continue. So within a couple of weeks, I decided, okay, so I'm going to do three months, minimum 100 days. And then I said, okay, minimum 200 days. And then after that, I knew that I didn't need to give myself any days, because I'm not giving anything up. I'm only gaining.
Fantastic. And before we get to the sex part, before we get to that part, in your book, you mentioned gray area drinkers. What does that mean?
Yeah, so this was a term that I certainly hadn't come across before, but it absolutely sums up how I was and how many people are. So in the UK particularly, we tend to think that there are two types of drinkers. There are those people who are absolutely at rock bottom, alcoholics, you know, in inverted commas, people who need alcohol services and rehab. And I absolutely didn't resonate with that. I was fully functioning. I was going to work every day. I don't think I ever took a day off work. I mean, I knew that I had, you know, a serious issue and I felt terrible, but nobody else would have known. So I was fully functioning, but I was drinking more than I wanted to. And we now know that the term for those people is grey area drinkers. So they're not right at the bottom of the spectrum. The game isn't all completely up, but they're not okay either. In my TEDx talk, you know, I said, you know, there are at least 50 shades of grey and none of them are sexy, right? Because it's like this kind of booze elevator. And so we're somewhere on it, those people who are drinking. And my absolute top tip is don't wait till you get to rock bottom. You can step off that elevator anytime you like, because that's where the magic is. That's where you find out who you are. That's where you live a better life. Nobody ever told me that. I always used to think, well, I don't have a problem. I'm not at rock bottom, so I must be fine. And I had no idea that actually life is just so much better without any.
Yeah, because I found that, I mean, went to UK into university, and everyone's getting so wasted at university. I remember going to some parties and you have to step over these drunk people who've passed out. That was quite common. Then I did my year abroad in France, and it was a completely different thing. It was people were way more civilized with alcohol. And I actually gave up when I was living in Paris as well, because I remember going out with a group of foreign friends and I was the only drunk one, the English ones. We just looked silly, you know, in a group where everyone else is sober. But going on to socializing, actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that no one's happy for you when you give up alcohol. It's not the same as giving up tobacco. I remember a couple of years ago, a friend told me, "Oh, it's a pity you don't drink anymore," because I just wanted a party friend.
I know.
You know, and I think they weren't happy that sobriety was going so well for me. And have you had any similar experiences?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really big thing for people when they first stop drinking. You know, I work as a coach now, and I've had so many clients who say to me, well, because we've had lockdown, they've been sort of almost protected in this kind of bubble because no one's been going out. And then they'll say to me, actually, I'm really scared of lockdown ending because my friends are going to be expecting me to go out and socialize. And they're already sending me texts saying, oh, can't wait till we can hammer the booze again. And it's almost as though people are afraid that they're not going to be fun anymore. And of course, this is what gets leveled at you by the sober shamers, you know, sober anagram of bores. Actually, the opposite is true. It's drunk people who are boring, right? And when you really step into your new identity, which takes a little while, but when you step into your new identity as someone who doesn't drink, that doesn't make you less fun. It makes you more fun. However, having said that, you know, you may find your socializing changes a bit because you won't have the same, well, I call it a boredom threshold. You know, you get so fed up with people repeating themselves. And you're almost certainly going to want to leave early. So I always say, you know, do your prep, decide, give your friends a heads up. And actually, you can say whatever you like. You can fib if you want to, you know, or you can say whatever you need to say. You know, listen, I'm driving, or I'm on medication, or I'm choosing not to drink for a while. Or you might even want to be totally honest and say, do you know what? I'm not drinking. I feel so much better. And the best way you can support me is just let's just have a great time. You don't need to worry about me. You know, and you ring the venue, find out what great alcohol-free drinks they've got, and if they don't have any, absolutely take your own, so that you're not feeling kind of left out with your cup of tea or your Coca-Cola. You know, you want a nice grown-up drink, and plan your taxi home early and plan something for the next morning so that you have no temptation of feeling. It's that kind of looking after the unconscious mind, because otherwise the little inner toddler says, oh, this isn't fair. Everyone else is having fun and I'm not having fun. And the sooner we can realize that, you know, there's this expression, isn't there? The FOMO, you know, the fear of missing out. But we need to switch that to JOMO. It's the joy of missing out. Your life is so much richer, and you get the next day rather than the hangover Monday.
I think for me, when I gave up alcohol, my whole social life changed, because a couple of my drinking pals had kind of left Barcelona, where I live. So I didn't have that temptation so much. So I adopted a more kind of daytime social life, more lunches and hiking and nature and things like that. So I wasn't really in contexts where I was the only sober person, which can be really difficult. And also, speaking of temptation, in your TED Talk, which I watched last night, you mentioned the wine witch. And I found, for example, just after giving something up, even it could be tobacco as well, there's a period of temptation. But after that period of temptation comes rejection. So what you said just now about the repetition, the slurring, and then the burps and the smell, it's just like, oh no, it's not a good look.
It's not. I mean, it you know, when I think back now, oh my goodness, it's like, well, how much time did I waste? Just is that lovely phrase, you know, tired of thinking about drinking. How much time did I waste just kind of planning where I'd drink? I mean, I would never kind of arrange to go somewhere unless booze was involved. So even if I was going to watch a film, it was like, oh, I must arrive at a certain time earlier so that I can have a drink before the film starts. Or, you know, if I was taking my kids bowling, so, oh, okay, well, is there a bar there? I mean, just pathetic when I think back to it now. And there's actually nothing elegant or glamorous about drinking. I mean, there really isn't. As you say, you know, people passed out. It's, you know, it's really horrible when the scales come off and you see it for what it is. It's just that we've all been marketed to it. The way that we're marketed to is we're made to feel that alcohol is glamorous. I absolutely bought into that rubbish. I really did. I thought that it was my piece of self-care, my grown-up treat to have my, you know, my cold glass of Sauvignon. I really thought that that was my reward as a busy mum or whatever. And this, excuse me, choking myself. This is what gets us. Yeah,
definitely. And also here in Spain, it's like, and also as in France, it's very much marketed as a kind of like cultural thing, like a high cultivated thing, or even a health thing in some contexts. So let's talk about sober sex. So you mentioned that some people, or actually drunk sex first, let's go drunk first. You mentioned that some people only have sex when they are drunk. That is so sad. And it's well documented that alcohol is not good for sex. It can provoke erectile issues, and the overall numbness just makes us less orgasmic. And despite this, it does lower inhibitions. I remember one thing I did like about alcohol-induced sex was the alcohol-induced conversations. For example, when you're with someone that you really like at the beginning, when you're not sure how serious it is, and then you have these declarations of love. I mean, sometimes those things don't happen or without alcohol. You know, so how can we have these meaningful, deep conversations without Dutch courage?
I mean, it's a really interesting take on it, but actually when you think back to those, you know, as you described them, meaningful conversations, were they actually meaningful? Because certainly in my own case, I can remember those kinds of occasions, but while I might have remembered them, the person I was with probably didn't. You know, so number one, you may not remember it. Number two, you may say things you don't mean, which happens a lot. And what we know absolutely to be true is that sex with someone, you know, when you're kind of both drunk, particularly if it's a sort of passing encounter, usually leaves you feeling really very empty. You know, there's not very many people that feel totally comfortable with having had that experience. And okay, you were completely drunk and you maybe said lots of things that you don't remember the next day. And how amazing and fantastic is that? And I feel really completely at peace and balanced. Actually, no, certainly for me, I didn't feel like that at all.
I think the single people going out on the pool and getting drunk, I mean, it's not really about sexual urge or libido. It's about ego, in my opinion, just having sex with strangers.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a slightly different conversation, but I mean, I just think that what I now know, you know, of course I didn't back then, but what I now know is that the most important thing really is to actually, you know, respect yourself, have that self-esteem, that self-love. And that doesn't have to be completely woo-woo, and it doesn't have to be egotistical at all, but it's just when you meet someone who is very comfortable with who they are, that really shines through. And if you're comfortable with who you are, if you like yourself, if you actually properly like yourself, then you're going to be much more attractive. You're also going to be much better at setting boundaries, at asking for what you need. And it's all going to be much more, I don't know, more effortless really. And definitely more satisfying than someone who is actually very insecure, the way I was, very insecure, quite needy, actually doesn't really like myself very much. So most encounters are really only about trying to find some validation from someone else, which then if you don't get it quite in exactly the way you want it, you end up feeling very empty and lost and lonely. And I think all booze does is amplify what's already going on. So if you're already feeling, a little bit insecure and a little bit wobbly, we'll just amplify it.
Definitely.
It doesn't help anything. There's no way that alcohol helps anything. I really believe that. I used to buy into all that nonsense that alcohol, that at least in moderation is good for you. I just don't buy that. Not at all. You can 100% have a natural high without the booze.
And also there's lots of new research that's just came out about women of childbearing age shouldn't have any alcohol at all.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I mean, when I look back and I remember that, I didn't drink in my pregnancies, but I was just gritting my teeth, waiting till I could drink again. And I certainly drank as soon as the baby was born. The first thing I did, even during breastfeeding, I'm ashamed to say, because it's the dumb thing, it's the mummy wine culture. But yeah, there's plenty of research out there. It's just we don't like to look at it. We don't like to look at the research that actually shows, really, in truth, alcohol is the number one most harmful drug. When you take into account everything, the economy, the harm to others, it's off the scale. And again, as I said a little bit before, I mentioned it sort of briefly, most of us do come to a point where we kind of understand that alcohol is not good for us, and we have this sense of, I ought to stop, I must stop because I don't want to jeopardize my chances of getting pregnant if you're that age, or I don't want to be overweight, or whatever the pain point is, whatever the don't want is. We kind of focus on that because we know deep down that alcohol is really bad for us. But then we have this massive struggle because all of society is geared towards forcing us to drink the whole time, at least at some point. And that's why I want to switch this conversation, so that rather than just talking about that, for me, that's just a given. It's just a given. We know that alcohol is bad for us. It's a poison. It's the number one most harmful drug. It's hideous. Everything about it is hideous. And if it were brought onto the market today, it probably wouldn't get licensed. It probably wouldn't, right? But it is, and it's here, and it doesn't serve any benefits. So why not focus instead on how much better life is without it? Because nobody ever told me that. Nobody ever told me that. I might see a therapist or a counselor, or if I ever went to the GP for something minor, and then I felt brave enough with the person I was talking to kind of just touch on the subject. And I'd right at the end of the consultation, I'd say, oh, by the way, there's just one thing. I'm actually a bit worried about my drinking. It took a lot for me to admit that, a lot. And of course, the GP would usually say, well, you seem fine. How much are you drinking? And then obviously I'd lie, because everyone does, and they know you do. Oh, a couple of glasses. Well, you seem fine. I tell you what, here's how you can do it. Just have a glass of water, with every glass of wine, and maybe, take Wednesdays off. It would be their attitude. Whereas clearly, then. Yeah, well, or just have a couple of alcohol-free days, or that's their answer. Whereas really, the conversation should have gone, I'm worried about my drinking. That should have immediately, that GP should be thinking to themselves, okay, that's really taken a lot for her to admit that. This is a massive thing, And really, the answer should be, well, do you know what? I've got amazing news for you. Don't drink. Let me help you. Let me signpost you to amazing ways that you can focus on optimum health and well-being, because your life is going to be so much better without booze. No one ever says that to you.
There's some dangers with drunk sex, is that, contraception is forgotten. And also something that worries me as a sexpert, I'm kind of anti-promiscuity and hookup culture.
Yeah,
and I think
definitely.
It's really sad, in this day and age, that people are using these apps and meeting up with people they don't even know. And also they're going around to their house, or or vice versa. And then they're not telling their friends where they are, or who's coming around to see them.
Well, there's no doubt your inhibitions are absolutely going to be affected.
So how drinking. Do we, to have these conversations or advise people without feeling like, or without kind of being prudish?
I mean, I think, I think for me, of course, my main thing that I'm trying to focus on is trying to encourage people to give this a try. Choosing not to drink, give that a try. And yes, if that means you can only do it to start with for 30 days, give it a try. However, while you're giving it a try, rather than focusing on everything you can't have, rather than focusing on gritting your teeth till you can drink, focus on the prize, focus on what's to come for the future, focus on how much better you're going to feel, focus on how much more energy you're going to have, what else you're going to be able to do with your time, because when you're not drinking, you free up so much time. And I really believe when you do that, when you're a little while in, and it can take a while, it can take a couple of months for some people, because your sleep might be disrupted at the beginning. It can take a little while, but it's investment in yourself. And if you do that, I really believe you will start to like yourself more. You start to get a sense of your own authenticity, of who you really are. And when you know who you really are and you like yourself a little bit more, you can really ask yourself, do I actually want that, meaningless hookup? Do I want that? Is that what I really want for me?
As well. Probably start attracting different people.
Exactly. Because you're no longer trying to, fill a hole in everything that means. There are different, you want connection on a different level. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we can kind of necessarily, well, I certainly couldn't kind of preach at people as to what to do with regard to their relationships. But I genuinely believe that if you look to yourself first, if you get that relationship sorted first, that relationship with yourself, which I don't believe you can do when you're drinking. I think it's really, really hard. I think it's really hard to actually genuinely be able to say that you take proper care of yourself and you have that sense of self-love when you're drinking.
Definitely. And also there's lots of talk about alcohol and consent recently. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think you have to be completely sober to consent to sex?
I don't know is the answer to that. I don't think I'd go as far as to say that you have to be completely sober. No, I mean, I think there's been many occasions when I haven't been sober and I've consented and that was okay. Perhaps I was lucky, but I just think it comes back to the same thing, that why would you put yourself in potentially dangerous situations? Why would you put yourself in a situation that you're going to regret the next day because you've basically taken some mind-altering substance? Why would you do that? It's actually bizarre. We don't put ourselves at risk the whole time. We don't all constantly dangle off the edge of cliffs. Why would we do that? Because we want, we have self-preservation instincts. We want to take care of ourselves.
That's what you find in those situations, that the friends don't really look after you. I remember being sober at a birthday
Well, they're probably
party.
drunk themselves, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. And this friend of mine was going back on one of these, these bikes that people rent. And she was drunk. And I was just thinking, oh, text me when you get home. But no one else bothered, because everyone's in their own kind of drunk bubble as well. Another thing you said in your book is that 27% of millennials are teetotal. Do you think this could be part of the reason why young people are reported to be having less sex than previous generations?
That's a really interesting question. It is true that there's a bunch of millennials who are not drinking. And I think that's for a variety of reasons. I think it's partly because they've got a bit more sense when it comes to, how they're going to spend their time and money, because, it's expensive and they recognize that you're just totally wasting money and wasting your time. I also think there's much more of a consciousness around mental health and well-being. And that link cannot be denied. The link between, alcohol and poor mental health and anxiety and depression cannot be denied, and it's time it was spoken about a lot more, actually. So I think it's great that younger people are a lot of them are aware of that. There's also a real big rise in the sober curious movement, or the mindful drinkers, the people that really are trying to make moderation work, so that they've got their very set rules about when they drink, and they drink mindfully rather than just getting, absolutely bladdered and doing the things they say they don't want to. Is that the reason they're not having as much sex? I don't know. It might come into it. I wouldn't say it's the only reason. I think it's a bigger conversation, because, you know, what we were just talking about, that whole conversation of self-respect and self-care. I think if you are someone who has a really strong sense of sort of authenticity and taking care of yourself, and it's only in relatively recent years we've been able to say that without sounding way too woo-woo. You know, even 15 years ago, if we'd have been talking about self-care and really, you know, being able to love yourself, everyone would say, oh, for goodness sake, don't be so woo-woo. But now we can talk about that stuff. And I think actually, one of the reasons people might be having less sex is because of exactly what we've just been saying. They do believe that they are, you know, that their sense of connection is precious. So why would they just fritter it away on a meaningless encounter?
So what's the sexy side of sobriety for you? What do you think?
You know, I think sobriety is it's like a superpower. It honestly is. It takes a while to get there. I mean, I'm always, you know, although I am, you know, queen of positivity around it all, you know, I do like to tell people the truth. That is, you may not feel fantastic within the first couple of weeks. You may not lose any weight. You may not have clear skin. You may not sleep well. And you might be a bit of a mess emotionally. It can be an emotional roller coaster. If you're really doing this, you are getting back in touch with who you really are. And it's a big journey. It's a really big journey. But once you're through that hard bit, as it were, everything opens up for you, and you do start to like yourself. And that's the key to everything. And you start to see the beauty in everything, and you become kinder. For me, all of that adds up to just feeling, you feel better about yourself. So of course you take more care of yourself. So of course you feel more confident and you feel more sexy. And you know how we started this conversation, I was terrified of getting older. Terrified. I couldn't see anything good about the future. Just, everything's going to go south. I'm just going to get more and more grey and miserable and fatter and more bloated and less energy. And I don't feel that way anymore. I'm not scared of getting older now. Now it feels exciting and fabulous, because more and more great things happen all the time. And that's 100% down to sobriety.
And you remember them, which is even more important.
And you remember them. Absolutely. You remember everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you become more kind. You really do. That is a big factor.
Mm-hmm.
A big factor. And some relationships shift and shape a little bit. But I love that saying. I don't know who said it, but someone said, you know, as you grow, you know, as you change and grow, you don't have to concern yourself with people that are not growing with you, because they just naturally fall away.
Definitely. So tell us about the Sober Club. So how were you inspired to change, to kind of convert your own life decision into something you're going to share with your community?
Yeah, well, I came out when I was about 8 months sober. For ages, I kept it a secret. It's really interesting. I felt such a sense of shame. And I didn't really realize just how many people were doing this thing, you know, and it's wonderful when you do, when you get the right support. I did realize that, you know, that phrase that Johann Hari, you know, stated in his TED talk, the opposite of addiction is connection. And I really started to get that there were a ton of things I wanted to talk about and I wanted to share, but there was no point in doing it with someone who hadn't been there, done it, got the t-shirt. There's no point in talking to, you know, to someone who was a drinker, and there was no point in talking to someone who had never ever tasted alcohol, because never been their thing. I needed to talk to people who had had the same experience, who had been locked into this and had become free, found their freedom, you know. So I did my TEDx talk, I started my podcast, Alcohol-Free Life, and then I decided a couple of years ago to start the Sober Club, and it's just been amazing, because it's a community of people who are all at different stages. So we have people who are day one, just starting out, curious and trying to find their, you know, fit into their sober shoes. And then we've got people who are kind of 5 years sober, and but it's all about the what's next. It's like the sobriety underpins it, And there's lots of content, and there's a whole course around the best ways to get through those early stages easily, and so that you feel as well as you can feel. But then we're on to all sorts of other things. So we have sessions on breath work and angel card readings and nutrition and literally everything. Because I think once you've got that sobriety piece, so often people become really interested in all the other stuff, the optimum health and well-being, the what's going to happen in their future. People change careers. That's really common, or they start a new business, or, you know, they find their purpose. So it's really exciting to see how people change and transform when they've ditched the booze. So it's very, very small community. But yeah, it's really, it's really rewarding actually to do that work.
Definitely. A few quick questions. So what's the book that changed your life?
Well, I mean, obviously in terms of sobriety, it's Claire Pooley's book, which was called The Sober Diaries. If you want to go back even further, then it was a book that I read. I genuinely think that I've been doing this stuff for so many years. I sometimes joke that I've been writing about holistic health and well-being before coconut oil and kale had their own publicists, right? And one of the first books I read was in the 80s, and it was called Endless Energy by a woman called Leslie Kenton.
Oh, sounds great.
It was the most awesome book, and it completely changed my life. And it was at a time when hardly anyone was into this stuff. It was it was quite unusual to be into this stuff, and she really inspired my first book, which was called Imperfectly Natural Woman. And that book was well ahead of its time. It really was. And I think back now, I was talking about coconut oil and kale and far infrared machines and mindfulness and sustainability and all of that. And that was 2005, 2006. So yeah, they're probably the two books, but there are many.
Okay, so some quick questions. What do you do to relax at the end of the day now that there's no wine o'clock?
Yeah, I mean, a whole range of things now. I love having a walk in nature, and if I'm feeling really stressed, I know that that's the answer, and I can change everything very quickly if I just, walk through some trees, sit with my back against a tree, just calm everything down. I'm a very big fan of nice warm baths with some Himalayan salt and essential oils. I love my kind of meditation audios. And I still wind down with a drink, but I make it an alcohol-free drink. My phrase, keep the ritual, change the ingredients. I make lovely mocktails in lovely glasses, and absolutely keep that ritual.
Speaking of alcohol-free drinks, I was looking into an alcohol-free wine here in Spain, and I found one which was from the same brand, a very popular brand. And I just thought, it's full of sugar. So I'm kind of going for it's very difficult to find drinks that are, still not bad. I mean, I like kombucha a lot. I think that's a great
I was going to say kombucha's good.
Replacement, and also fizzy water with lemon. People think it looks like gin and tonic,
Yeah, I mean this is something I do a lot in the Sober Club. I talk about this a lot, and I think that you're right, there's a whole range from having a fizzy water or an artisan tonic. You can drop a couple of berries or some herbs in a glass of fizzy water or tonic and really pimp your drink. You can add a tiny bit of an alcohol-free spirit alternative, in inverted commas. There's a lovely one called Sea Arch, which is an artisan blend that's junipers and sea kelp in it. That doesn't contain any sugar at all. And then you can, as you say, kombucha. Some kombuchas are really good. I like the Busha brand, is really lovely. And then there are some alcohol-free sort of wines or fizz that are not too bad. They've certainly got nowhere near as much sugar in as alcohol, as wine. One brand is called Naughty, Noughty, and that's an alcohol-free fizz, which is very low in sugar and vegan, and a really nice alternative. So I think if you kind of look around, do your homework, you can find some drinks that are obviously don't have alcohol, but are also much healthier, in inverted commas. The great thing is there's so much choice now. That's what's really cool. I had a really lovely birthday party when I was just about a year sober, and I was really worried about it and thinking, oh, I'm going to be inviting friends, drinkers, and what do I do? Do I serve alcohol? And that didn't feel right. And I just didn't know what to do. And in the end, I just had an afternoon party, and I made it mocktails and cake. And it was such a success because we just literally laid out a whole bunch of alcohol-free drinks, a whole bunch of tonics, and like little pimping stations so you could have an olive or lemons or limes, and people loved it. It was really fun, a really great way of trying loads of new drinks. I would never have done that in the past. It was just give me the wine.
That's what I did it when I was before I gave up drinking. I would just see people in the day and not the night, just to not get tempted to get too drunk, have lunch instead of dinner or something like that. And make sure there's no alcohol. Another question, which phrase or affirmation, do you have a favorite affirmation that you live by, or a quote?
There's quite a few, actually. Let me see. I like feel the fear and do it anyway. That's always been, something that's kind of resonated with me. And then I think, when I worked for quite a long time sort of helping people with their businesses and media training and stuff because of my background in the media. And one phrase I love is, you don't have to get it right, but you do have to get it going. And I think that really applies to so many things, including choosing the path of sobriety. You might not get it right. It might not be perfect. Everything in your life might not be 100% healthy, but just get it going, get started on the path.
Excellent. So how can people find you?
I'm very easy to find. It's just Janey Lee Grace on social media, at Janey Lee Grace. The soberclub.com there's some blog posts, some competitions there. You can watch the TED Talk, you can listen to the podcasts. And then if you want to join us in the Sober Club, there's a small membership fee, and be part of everything we do there. But there's loads of stuff at the Sober Club, and I've got various books and things out as well. But yeah, I'm easily findable at Janey Lee Grace.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for joining us today on the Orgasmic Lifestyle podcast. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it.